Approval priority is assigned based on position in a queue rather than completion readiness. Entry into the queue becomes the governing rule, creating a structure where timing determines access. The system immediately shifts from evaluating readiness to tracking order of arrival. Approval speed becomes the primary reward, while losing position through reset becomes the dominant penalty. Actors recognize that early positioning secures future access regardless of preparedness. Entry timing begins to outweigh execution capability, shifting behavior toward preemptive placement. Actors begin entering the queue before they are fully prepared, initiating queue camping as a rational adaptation. The queue fills with partially ready participants who occupy positions without progressing. Processing capacity becomes misaligned with actual readiness, slowing throughput. What appears as high demand is not purely demand for processing, but demand for position preservation. The visible congestion suggests system overload, but the underlying driver is strategic early entry. The queue begins to function as a holding system rather than a processing pipeline. Threshold-based disclosure allows actors to reveal minimal required information to enter the queue. Full readiness is deferred while maintaining position, reducing immediate effort, but preserving future access. The system accumulates entries that meet entry thresholds but not processing requirements. Queue reset acts as a strong penalty, reinforcing the cost of losing position. Actors prioritize avoiding reset over improving readiness, leading to defensive behaviors around position retention. The system locks participants into maintaining status rather than progressing toward completion. As more actors adopt early entry, queue density increases without corresponding increases in processing output. Congestion emerges not from volume of completed applications, but from volume of positioned placeholders. The queue becomes saturated with low progress entries. A contrast emerges between intended function and actual operation. The queue is designed to sequence completed requests, yet it now sequences claims to future processing rights. The mechanism shifts from ordering work to allocating privilege. Actors facing front-loaded pain avoidance choose to incur minimal early effort to secure long-term advantage. The cost of preparing fully upfront is avoided in favor of securing position first. Preparation becomes a deferred activity, decoupled from entry. Coordination breakdown appears as processing units encounter entries that are not ready for evaluation. Time is spent cycling through incomplete cases, increasing friction within the system. Processing speed declines even as queue participation rises. The signal of queue length begins to distort system perception. Longer queues suggest higher workload, but actual processable work does not increase proportionally. Resource allocation responds to misleading indicators, reinforcing inefficiency. Actors observing long queues are incentivized to enter even earlier to avoid delays. This accelerates the timing race, pushing entry further away from readiness. The system experiences temporal compression at the entry stage. A measurable distortion appears as approval timelines extend despite stable or unchanged processing capacity. Delays are attributed to workload, but the underlying cause is misaligned entry behavior. Throughput per unit of effort declines. Another contrast forms between speed as a reward and actual processing velocity. Faster approval is promised through early positioning, yet overall system speed deteriorates. Individual advantage aggregates into collective slowdown. Actors become locked into maintaining queue position once entered, even if their readiness does not improve. Exiting and re-entering carries the risk of reset, discouraging correction. The system accumulates static entries that resist movement. The queue evolves into a structure that prioritizes persistence over preparedness. Success is determined by how early and how long one holds position. Execution quality becomes secondary to endurance within the queue. As this pattern stabilizes, new entrants adopt queue camping as a default strategy. The behavior is no longer adaptive but expected. Entry timing becomes standardized earlier across all participants. The system transitions into access congestion as a permanent condition rather than a temporary imbalance. Congestion is sustained by strategic behavior, not fluctuating demand. The queue ceases to clear efficiently. A final contrast appears between fairness and outcome. The system appears fair because order is preserved, yet access is determined by who can engage earliest rather than who is most prepared. The rule maintains order while distorting allocation. Over time, the system settles into a slow-moving privilege equilibrium. Positions in the queue function as durable claims to future access, independent of readiness. Movement becomes incremental and resistant to acceleration. In this equilibrium, the queue no longer regulates flow of work, but distribution of access. Actors optimize for position acquisition and retention, while processing becomes secondary. The system stabilizes around privilege preservation rather than efficient execution. As queue positions become durable, actors begin to treat entry timing as a long-horizon investment rather than a short-term action. Early entry secures future access at the cost of immediate readiness, aligning behavior toward position accumulation over execution. The system shifts toward prioritizing long-term queue presence, extending the time horizon of competition. Because entry only requires threshold-based disclosure, the system cannot distinguish between fully prepared and minimally compliant participants. Information asymmetry emerges between apparent eligibility and actual readiness, reducing the reliability of queue signals. Processing units increasingly operate on incomplete information, amplifying inefficiency. Actors observe that minimal compliance is sufficient to secure and maintain position, reinforcing underpreparation as a stable strategy. Full disclosure becomes unnecessary at entry, delaying verification to later stages. The queue accumulates informational gaps that slow evaluation and increase friction. As more participants adopt early entry, the temporal gap between entry and readiness widens across the system. This creates a layered queue where most entries are temporally distant from completion. The system shifts from sequencing ready tasks to managing a backlog of deferred readiness. A feedback loop emerges as congestion signals drive even earlier entry behavior. Longer queues incentivize participants to move their entry point further forward in time to avoid delays. Entry timing escalates recursively, increasing congestion without improving throughput. Processing capacity remains fixed while queue volume expands through early positioning. Each additional entry consumes attention during evaluation cycles. Even if not processable, the system experiences scaling amplification where small behavioral shifts produce disproportionate slowdowns. Queue reset continues to function as a hard constraint, discouraging correction of premature entry. Actors remain in suboptimal states rather than risk losing position. This locks the system into maintaining inefficient configurations over time. A contrast appears between the intention of early entry and its systemic effect. Early positioning is meant to secure faster approval, yet collectively it delays all participants. Individual optimization generates collective stagnation. As actors compete to enter earlier, coordination across participants collapses further. No actor can delay entry without risking disadvantage, even if delayed entry would improve readiness. The system enforces synchronization around premature action. The measurable distortion intensifies as approval timelines extend beyond what processing capacity would predict. Delays become structurally embedded rather than episodic. The queue transforms into a time buffer, absorbing misaligned behavior. At this stage, it becomes unclear whether congestion is driven more by entry timing or by processing inefficiency. Both signals reinforce each other, making causal attribution ambiguous. The system continues to operate without resolving this uncertainty, deepening dependency on the queue. Actors respond to prolonged timelines by further reducing upfront preparation effort. Since early entry already secures position, preparation shifts increasingly downstream, concentrating effort at later stages. This increases the variance of processing times and stabilizes flow. The queue begins to exhibit persistence even when inflow stabilizes, as existing entries cycle slowly through incomplete states. Clearing the queue requires resolving deferred readiness rather than reducing entry volume. The system becomes resistant to normalization. Another contrast emerges between visibility and actual progress. High queue activity suggests movement, yet most entries remain stagnant in readiness terms. The system signals activity while underlying progress remains constrained. As this loop continues, the cost of participating in the queue increases in time rather than effort. Actors must commit to longer durations to maintain access. The system reallocates cost from preparation to endurance, reinforcing the privilege structure. The equilibrium tightens as all actors converge on early entry and position retention as dominant strategies. Deviating from this pattern results in immediate disadvantage. The system locks into a stable but inefficient cycle driven by its own incentive structure. The system no longer rewards readiness at the point of entry, but rewards how early a position is secured and how long it is maintained. Actors who enter earliest gain durable access regardless of completion status, while those who wait to prepare lose position entirely. Preparation shifts from being a prerequisite for access to a secondary activity constrained by queue survival. What the system begins to ignore is actual processing readiness at the moment of entry, since threshold-based disclosures satisfies entry conditions. Fully prepared actors receive no advantage if they arrive later, while minimally prepared actors retain priority through early positioning. The signal of readiness loses relevance in determining access. The primary penalty becomes loss of position through queue reset, which outweighs any cost associated with incomplete preparation. Actors avoid exiting or delaying entry, even when correction would improve readiness, narrowing future actions to maintaining presence. The system enforces persistence over optimization, locking behavior into defensive positioning. Compared to the prior state where queues sequenced ready work, the system now sequences claims to future processing rights. Order is preserved, but it no longer reflects execution readiness or processing efficiency. Access becomes a function of temporal positioning rather than capability. Under this equilibrium, all participants converge on early entry and prolonged queue occupation as the dominant strategy. Any deviation, delayed entry, full preparation before positioning results in immediate disadvantage. The system stabilizes around a structure where behavior aligns entirely with incentive-defined access rather than task completion.